My name is Aaron. I'm part of the leadership team here. If you don't know me, then I'd love to talk to you afterwards. As Simon has said, we're doing a series, BA for BQ. And when I saw that, I thought, it looks a bit like what you used to scratch onto the desk when you were at school. If your name was Ben Atkins, maybe. But I was thinking a little bit about that and BA for BQ, and I was thinking, actually, big answers, they love big questions. And that's where I want us to get to as a people, that we love big questions. We love people coming to us and saying, this is a big one. What about this? What about that? And we love it because we've got big answers. Okay? So that's what this series is for. That's where we want to get to as a people. We want to be deep and be able to have big answers to the big questions. But this morning, we're not actually going to go through any answers, just to lay that out for you and disappoint you all from the get-go, because this is the introduction to the series. Oh, that's brilliant. The light's gone off and it's a bit warm. So we're gonna maybe just look at why this is important, why it's important to have big answers to big questions. And then we're going to look at a few lessons that we can learn from the verse that we read together, 1 Peter 3:15, which is the whole premise for the series, really. I won't read that again because we've just read it together. But I want to highlight our value for this morning, which is, it's cut off a bit at the bottom. But that's fine, that's just some references. You can look them up on the internet. We value the giving of our lives, our time and our money to God's mission. To display devotion to Jesus Christ and to this town, we know that we must put our lives, our time and our money where our mouths are. The greatest testimony to our integrity as followers of Christ is that we put him and his mission before our own comfort, agenda or financial security. Everything we have is from God anyway, so our first desire should be to give it to him unreservedly and joyously as motivated by the Holy Spirit. And I chose this value because I want to challenge us to give exactly that for this series. Primarily, life and time. Money, there's a little bit of money involved because I'm encouraging you and saying to you, buy this book. Okay, so buy this book. I can't emphasize that enough. But don't just buy it, read it, reread it, scribble notes in it. My wife hates the way that I treat books because I leave them open like this. She works in a library, so she's all fussy about books. I write in them in pen, sacrilege. And I wrestle with a book. A book that I really like, the spine is all creased and destroyed, and there's the corners have all been folded over where I need to make a note of that later. I haven't got a pen with me. Read this book, reread it, discuss it in your family, particularly if you've got teenagers in your family or even younger children. Start dealing with these questions now, so they don't get to 18 years old or 16 years old and think, oh my goodness, I've got no clue what life is about. This person's given me some answers. I'm just going to go with that. So let's do that with this book. I want to commend the book to you and the series. Don't just listen to the talks. I'm not necessarily saying this morning, but the talks that are coming up are going to be answers to big questions. And so I want to encourage you to listen to the talks, make some notes. If you're not a note taker, I don't take notes generally when I'm listening. That's just, I think if what I remember is what I'm going to remember, and what washes over me, it obviously wasn't that great, which is, probably a bit rude to the people who are preaching, but that's kind of how I operate. But I am going to take notes, and if you see me not taking notes, you have full authority to come and smack the back of my hand or something. I am going to take notes for this series because I want to review those notes. I want to re-listen to the sermons after they've been spoken. And I'm going to devote some time to discussing it with my wife, and then eventually we're going to be talking about this stuff in small groups. So I would encourage you, give some time to it. Maybe get up half an hour early or go to bed half an hour early and discuss it as a couple if you're married, or, arrange a time to meet up with someone and have a coffee and talk about one of the questions. Okay, I want to challenge you to give your life, your time, and a little bit of your money to really getting this deep inside us. Okay? There are three groups of people in the world generally. This is very, very general. There's men, women, and everyone else. No. There's people who are of the Christian faith, who believe, like most of us, I would say, who you're a follower of Jesus. You've met the risen Lord Jesus Christ. There's people who are in the middle, who are kind of undecided, or they haven't really made their alliance yet. And there are people who are actively out to discredit the Christian faith and the belief in God in general. The people who are on that far end, who are looking to discredit Christianity and faith and the belief in God, they're not resting on their laurels. They're not having a chill out time and saying, we don't need to do anything. We can just let them do their thing and we'll do our thing and we'll get on with it and everyone will be happy because they'll pick whatever they want. There's a rise in both camps of being more and more fundamental, and the people who are out to discredit the Christian faith are actively seeking, I'm not sure if it's ever been like this as much as it is now, but they're actively seeking to snatch people from the middle and convince them that the whole God thing is hogwash. Okay? So if they're not resting on their laurels, we need to not rest on ours, because they're going to have questions to ask and answers to propose to those questions, and we need to have the same. Okay? So it's a challenge, and this is real and it's important. So, as I said this morning, we're not going to be looking at any specific answers, but we are going to be looking at why it is important to have answers and lessons from a failure. I say failure funny, to get over it. So the failure is Peter, who knows what it's like to be questioned and not have an answer, and we'll look at that a bit later on. So why is it important for Christians to ask and answer big questions about their faith? I want to propose that there's two important reasons, but I'm going to read a quote from the book I've got written down here. This is from Timothy Keller in The Reason for God. People who blindly go through their life too busy or indifferent to ask hard questions about why they believe what they do will find themselves defenceless against either the experience of tragedy or the probing questions of a smart skeptic. I'll read that again. People who blithely go through life too busy or indifferent to ask hard questions about why they believe what they do will find themselves defenceless against either the experience of tragedy or the probing questions of a smart skeptic. So, I believe that it's important for us to have big answers, to have answers to questions when we're asked by other people and when we ask ourselves, because it makes our faith more robust. Go to the next slide. Able to stand up to doubts when we're going through difficult times. It's good for ourselves because we're not then confronted suddenly with a question and go, oh my goodness, I never thought this would happen. Maybe it is all rubbish. It makes our faith strong, robust, and able to stand up to difficult times, and we can respond to those who ask us in a genuine, thoughtful, and relevant way, not just ethereal platitudes. Okay, ethereal platitudes, that's a bit of a Simon, sorry. But this is the kind of thing I mean. Someone comes up to you and they say, I've just found out I've got cancer. Why does God let stuff like this happen? And you say to them, his eye is on the sparrow. And that's a little bit funny. That's a little bit funny, but I can imagine that happening. So that's a serious thing. Okay, it's not good enough. That is not good enough at all. One of my uncles just recently went through a whole thing with cancer. If someone had said that to him, I would be so angry. That is not good enough. Our answers to questions can't be cold logic or detached philosophy, and they can't be an unexplained Bible quote. His eye is on the sparrow. That's really true, and that's probably quite relevant to that person, but that can't be your whole answer. We should be aiming for those three elements. We should be aiming for a logical, philosophical, and a biblical truth to come together in a way that is relevant to the individual and our surrounding culture. The context of 1 Peter 3:15 is that he was writing a letter to Christians who were experiencing persecution. They were suffering, they were going through a lot of things, but he was saying to them, carry on living in hope. Don't be troubled by those things, but revere Christ as the Lord, and always be ready to give an answer for the hope that you have. So when we're going through a difficult time and we're living in hope and we seem to be joyful even though we're suffering, people go, how can you do that? And you can say, I've got this hope because of Jesus. Give an answer because of the hope that's in us. By wrestling with and eventually overcoming a doubt. If you've got a doubt and you're a little bit worried, or if I pick at this too much, it might wreck my faith, and maybe I'll think that I'm not actually saved. There is no doubt that's bigger than our faith. If you search it through properly, if you seek counsel from other people, any question, any doubt will find its answer in the Bible and in Jesus. By wrestling with and eventually overcoming a doubt, whether it's our own or one that's been raised to us, we deepen the roots of our own faith and provide credibility to our faith to those who don't believe, and also learn to better understand people who are coming to us. If you've never been through if you've never wrestled with a doubt, you just go, oh, that's nonsense. You just have to believe and you'll be fine. That's not good enough. We need to be engaged philosophically, logically, and biblically. You can't just quote verses at people and think that that's going to be fine, depending on the verses. If you tweak them the right way, you could find a philosophical, logical argument, and it would be all fine. Anyway, it's not enough to blindly say, I have faith in God and that's all I need. Okay? Not only are you setting yourself up to be devastated, but you're also damaging the reputation of Christianity as a faith. So please, again, let's give time to this. Let's give time to digging deep, listening to what's going to be said in the future weeks. It's 9 weeks. Okay, 9 weeks of your time, maybe 40 minutes, 45 minutes on a Sunday morning. Listen to it again, that's an hour and a half. I'd say if you dedicate, some people are an hour maybe. If you dedicate 2 or 3 hours a week to really digging deep into these questions over the next 9 weeks, it will benefit you and us so very much. We should be prepared to defend the faith well, in part by honouring and loving people enough to let them have their own opinions, but also love them enough to challenge them on what they think. Our aim should be able to sit and talk with someone who's got a ridiculous opinion in our thing, and who equally thinks we're as ridiculous as they are. You're both going to look weird to each other, but be able to have a civil conversation, debate, and still maintain that level of relationship. Okay, we'll talk a little bit more about that later. Okay, and I know that some people will probably flag up to me and go, Paul said in 1 Corinthians 2, I came to you not with words of wisdom or, the knowledge of this world, but I came with a demonstration of the Spirit's power, so that your faith wouldn't be based on words of wisdom and logic and all of these great things that people celebrate in the world. Now that's true, but I think we're talking about two different things. That is talking about someone coming to faith based on being convinced and argued. You can't argue someone into the kingdom of God. There has to be a spiritual rebirth. There has to be something supernatural take place. So one thing is, Paul is talking about when people get saved, and what we're talking about is deepening your own faith and removing barriers to faith. So we're not talking about if you give someone all the answers to these questions, they have to become a Christian. They've got no choice in the matter. We're talking about there are things that people say, I'd love it if I could just believe that, but I don't know, I just can't square this away with that. So what we're saying is, help them square this away, and then all they're left with is the problem of the gospel. So just so we're clear, our evangelism must be through lifestyle, demonstrations of spiritual power, reasonable and logical thought, and boldly declaring the message of Jesus. Okay, it's not just one or the other, it's all four of those things. The best thing you can do for someone is to pray for God to move in their life supernaturally, answer and work through their objections as they raise them to you. Live your life in such a way that provokes them to ask you questions, and be able to tell them the message of the gospel clearly when they ask you. I'm not going to I'm going to hit the Francis of Assisi quote again, which says, Preach the gospel at all times, and when needed, use words. I would argue this is always needed to use words. Okay? It says in the Bible that faith comes by hearing. Now, I don't mean that deaf people can't get saved. What I'm talking about is you preach the word. You can't just live your life. That's only doing half the job. You have to be able to communicate the gospel in a way. So when I say there always needs words, that whether that's written down or sign language or whatever, faith comes by hearing and being engaged with the message of the gospel. Okay, so I think that's a brilliant quote, but as much as possible I'm going to hit it because it's used too much as an excuse. Okay, lessons from a failure. So that's why it's important. It's important. Sorry, can we just go back? It's important because by doing so, we make our faith robust, we make ourselves stronger and able to stand up to times of trial and testing, and we can respond better to people. We can respond in a way that's relevant, engaging and thoughtful, and actually, quite considerate of people because we've been through it ourselves. We know where they're at. Okay, sorry. Thank you, Duncan. So, lessons from a failure. Peter, who wrote this letter, he knew what it was like to not have an answer when someone questioned you. So we're going to turn to 1 Peter, if you've got your Bible, or it's up there. Okay. So this is slightly before that, before 15, but it's around that sort of area. It's down here, 13 to 16. Sorry. 13. Now, who is there to harm you if you are zealous for what is good? But even if you should suffer for righteousness' sake, you will be blessed. Have no fear of them, nor be troubled, but in your hearts honour Christ the Lord as holy, always being prepared to make a defence to anyone who asks you for a reason for the hope that you have, for the hope that is in you. Yet do it with gentleness and respect, having a good conscience, so that when you are slandered, those who revile your good behaviour in Christ may be put to shame. So I want to walk us through the 15 verse. That's why I've just left a little note in there so we can see where it starts. But Peter, the Peter who wrote this letter, he's the same Peter who denied Christ. He was questioned. All he was asked was, "You're one of them, aren't you? You were with him," and he had no answer. So he knows what it's like to be in a difficult situation and not have an answer when someone's questioning you. So this morning we're going to look at the main verse, 1 Peter 3:15. I'm going to just draw out a few important lessons from his encouragement that we need to keep in mind when we're using the answers that we're going to look at for the rest of the series. So this morning is kind of like these are some things we need to set in place so that when we're applying the knowledge that we've received, we're not doing it in a wrong way. Okay, so let's look at that verse again, 1 Peter 3:15. But in your hearts revere Christ as Lord. Always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have, but do this with gentleness and respect. So I want to pick out 3 lessons from that, and then we'll just look at a few little things about answering questions. So the first one is be nice, okay? The second is anytime and anyone. Third is know your hope. So be nice, do this with gentleness and respect. Anyone at any time. Always be prepared, everyone who asks. Know your hope, give a reason for the hope that you have. You have to have the hope in order to be able to give a reason for it. I've deliberately missed out, give an answer and the reason part because that's what's going to be looked at for the rest of the series, so we're not going to be focusing on that this morning. So be nice. Do this with gentleness and respect. There's a quote from Rick Warren that I want to read to us. I think that should be on there as well. Our culture has accepted 2 huge lies. The first is that if you disagree with someone's lifestyle, you must fear or hate them. The second is that to love someone means you agree with everything they believe or do. Both are nonsense. You don't have to compromise convictions to be compassionate. Just because someone's invited you to share your faith doesn't mean you get to be obnoxious or rude. There used to be a Budweiser advert, Real Men of Genius, and then there was a parody of that, which was Real Christians of Genius, and one of the things was You know, when others share their beliefs with you, you've got the courage to laugh in their face. You know, just because someone said to you, okay, tell me a little bit about what you believe. You don't go, well, what you think is rubbish because the Bible says this. Okay, you don't be obnoxious or rude. People will accuse you of this readily enough. People will. That's why Peter wrote, when they slander you, they'll be put to shame. People will accuse you readily enough, accuse us readily enough of being obnoxious and bigoted and rude without us having to give them some ammo to do it. So do it with gentleness and respect. We want to make sure that the only obstacle to people getting saved is the gospel. It's a difficult enough message as it is that a God became a man, lived a perfect life, died and then rose again, ascended to heaven. He's going to come back and remake the whole world. That's difficult enough if you don't believe already. You don't need to add our attitude in there as well. As my family, we're quite a discussion family, and we'll really hammer each other. Sort of, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. That's rubbish. That's okay in a family, and we all know that actually there are certain members of our family that if you're arguing that that this stand is white, they'll go, no, it's not, it's black. Just for the aggro. Some people are looking at that certain individual now. But that's okay in certain situations. Depending on the relationship you have with the person, which we'll look at in a minute, you can be a bit more robust and a bit more jabby and dig at each other. But there still needs to be gentleness and respect. Ooh. And I'm not saying pull punches. I'm not saying we compromise on the gospel. I'm not saying, oh well, there's Jesus and there's this as well. You could believe that and maybe that would be okay. You might sneak in the back door or whatever. I'm not saying pull punches. I'm saying don't be an offensive person. Be nice. Okay, always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks. Okay, this is not just for when we're in evangelism mode. It's not when, right, okay, got my evangelism kit on, going out on a Saturday morning. Right, we need to be able to answer these questions for ourselves first and foremost. If you can't answer it for yourself, you're not going to be able to answer it for anyone else. Not satisfactorily anyway. So if you can't answer it for yourself, something that should be a blip will actually cause devastation in your life. When something comes up, it should be like, oh, that's a pain, isn't it? That's what it should be, but actually it'll be like, oh my goodness, everything's falling apart. I'm done. Peter has written this letter to Christians who are suffering persecution. The encouragement and challenge we should take from the verse is we should be prepared to give a reason for our hope at all times. Whether it's in the middle of difficulties and persecutions, or whether it's in a bit where everything is coming up, Aaron. Walking along the street, I just found a £5. That's great. Look around, there's no one here. Oh, okay, well, I'm not going to take it to the police station, but, I don't know whether that's morally correct or not, but anyway. My point is, even in times when everything's going great, we should be prepared, and when everything's not going great, we need to be equally prepared. I'd say even more so prepared when times are difficult. So not only at any time that we're asked, but everyone who asks us. So if we're living our lives in a way that provokes people to question us, we've got to expect that we're going to get a whole range of people, from strangers to possibly, unbelieving spouses, asking questions of us. Our lifestyle should be provoking that. That's what's great about that quote, preach the gospel at all times, when needed, used words. Full on, yes. Preach it at all times. Live your life in such a way that it provokes people to go, how can you cope with life like that? How can you deal with that loss? Or how can you deal with not having a job, but you're still full of joy and you're confident in God and you know that things are going to work out for you? How can you do that? And then you've provoked the question. If we only live our life in a way that provokes the question but don't have the answers, we're only doing half the job. There's a couple of ideas that I've found useful for me personally in identifying and knowing how to respond to questions. And so we're going to look at those because they might be helpful for you as well, because they're helpful for me. And, you know, I'm bang in the middle normal, so everyone will probably get something from it. Okay, in general, there are two extremes for the type of question that will be asked, and I rate these on an up and down scale. These are the anytime, anywhere. Don't be a robotic parrot, but do be like Jesus and answer a question with a question. Okay? So, robotic parrot, someone asks you a question, you've learnt an answer, you know it, right, okay. Why does God send people to hell? I know this one. You sort of switch off, you go into your robotic parrot mode, and you go, God sends people to hell because they are sinners and they deserve it. No, that doesn't do anything for anyone, okay? You know, whilst that may be true in a theological sense, that doesn't engage with anyone, that doesn't help anyone. The best way to respond to a question is to ask another question, which we'll look at that in a minute, but I just want to go through something else first. So, in general, there are two extreme types of question that will be asked, and I class these on an up and down. The first is a test question. So this can be anyone who, you know, they just said to you, all right then, why is there suffering? If God's so good, why is there suffering? And that, what they're doing is you can sort of kind of tell sometimes by the way people ask that they're just out to see if you know what you're talking about. And actually what they want is for you to go, or they want you to present an answer so they can go, well actually what about this? Well what about that? And what about this? Because they just want to test you, they want to see what you're made of. Okay, the second is a heartfelt question. So that's a question that's got something behind it. So the same question, so why is there suffering then? Because they've just had something in their life and they want to know why God, who's so loving and so powerful, can have let this thing happen in their life. Okay, so that's the up and down. Okay, and that's why robotic parrot answers aren't helpful, because if someone's had that, you know, their sort of spouse or whatever has just died, and they say to you, well, does God really send people to hell? And you go, everyone is a sinner and deserves to go to hell. What are you doing to them? Okay, that's a difficult question, and it needs to be worked through slowly and carefully and thoughtfully. And then there's the relationship scale, which runs from stranger to family, best friend or spouse. And something that I've noticed is that the less of a stranger someone is, the stranger they become. You know, so I just thought I'd throw that in there for you. That was really bad, sorry. So this is how if someone asks me a question, I gauge it on this. So I go, how well do I know the person and what type of question do I think this is? And the aim is to get into the heartfelt section at the top and to get into the family friend section on that side. So that upper right hand quadrant is where you're aiming for. And the best way to do this is to ask a question back. Jesus was the master at this. I just want to read a quote to you. I'll read a little quick passage. It's from Matthew 21. I just love this. This is just it's just so good. He does this so many times. Jesus does this so many times in the Gospels. If you read it, just look out for it and you'll see it. So this is Matthew 21, verses 23 to 27. Okay? So this is the authority of Jesus is being challenged. And when Jesus entered the temple, the chief priests and the elders of the people came up to him as he was teaching and said, by what authority are you doing these things, and who gave you this authority? Jesus answered them, I also will ask you one question, and if you tell me the answer, then I'll tell you by what authority I do these things. The baptism of John, from where did it come from heaven or man? And the people who were questioning Jesus, they discussed it among themselves, saying, if we say from heaven, they'll say to us, then why didn't you believe him? And if they say from man, we were afraid of the crowd. They all hold John as a prophet. So what he's done there is he's said, they've asked him this question. They said, here's a difficult question for you. And he's gone, well, hang on, let me ask you a question first. Okay? And it doesn't have to be a really clever question. So, for example, someone asks you a question. They say, You've never met them before. It's a stranger. And they say, well, why does God allow suffering? You've literally never met them before. And you say to them, that's a really interesting question. Sorry, what's your name? And you ask them their name. That's the first question you ask them. You've instantly moved them further along towards the family, friend end of the spectrum. And you can then engage in another question. So they say, what do you mean by suffering? Why does God allow suffering? What do you mean by God? God is a very, very ambiguous term. Someone says to me, why does God allow suffering? Well, hang on. What God are you talking about? Are you talking about the God of the Bible that I know? Or are you talking about some guy with a big white beard sitting on a cloud? Because they're very, very different people. So, a good way to respond to a question is with another question. Okay? And so, by asking questions, you want to move them up into the heartfelt area and across into the family, best friend quadrant. Okay? So someone says, why does God allow suffering? It's an interesting question. Why do you ask that? Have you recently had something happen in your life? And, what you're doing is you're actually engaging with that person. You're engaging with them as a real person and a human being, not just, as has been said, we're not interested in evangelistic projects. We're interested in people and people coming to know Jesus Christ. So asking a question in response helps to identify the intention of the asker, shows that we're genuinely interested, and allows us to find out and clarify what people mean by ambiguous terms. We should have an answer for anyone and everyone who asks. There's a saying, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. It's the foolish person who says, if you stick its head under the water, as it drowns, it will choke some water down. Okay? Do not ram it down people's throats. We don't need to. Okay? It's people who ask. Our lifestyle should be provoking people to ask. And if it's not, ask yourself why not. Let's not drown people. Okay? Know your hope. Should always have a reason for the hope that we have. And we need to understand that everyone has a hope. No, it doesn't matter who you are or what you believe, you have a hope. So the person who says, science has proved that God is irrelevant and doesn't exist, they've pinned their hope on the belief that those scientists who've said that know more than they do and know more than anyone who's ever lived. They've pinned their hope on that. So we need to recognise that when someone doesn't believe, it's not just they've got no thoughts whatsoever. They've got a belief in something else. They've got an opinion and a hope that they've pinned somewhere else. But what is our hope? The hope that we have is that what is happening now, this world, is only temporary and nothing compared to what awaits us. 2 Corinthians 4:16 to 18. I just want to read this. 2 Corinthians 4:16 to 18. From now on, therefore, we regard no one according to the... Oh, sorry, that's the 5. This Bible is terrible. So we do not lose heart. Not the content, the way it's laid out. There's not like a gap between each book. It's really weird. But it was £1 on Amazon, okay? It's good for if you want to highlight and draw in pen and not get in trouble with your wife. Okay, 2 Corinthians 4, verse 16 to 18. So we do not lose heart. Though our outer self is wasting away, our inner self is being renewed day by day. For this light, momentary affliction is preparing us for an eternal weight of glory beyond all comparison, as we look not to the things that are seen, but to the things that are unseen. For the things that are seen are transient, temporary, but the things that are unseen are eternal. That's our hope. We have a hope that is eternal, but that's not all of our hope. Our hope is not just a what. It's not what we're waiting for. It's a who.
Yes.
Our hope is in a God in three persons. Our hope is in a Father who loved the world so much that he sent and sacrificed his Son to redeem the world to himself. Our hope is in a Holy Spirit who dwells within us and reassures us of that promise of what's to come, and works by the power of God through us, giving signs and pointers to the fact that there will be a day when there will be no more questions to answer, because suffering will end, doubts will end, and everything will be revealed. And even more than that, our hope is in Jesus, who, though he was God and was king, humbled himself and became a man who lived a meagre, humble, peasant's existence, eked out a living, worked hard, and yet he lived a perfect life, was entirely blameless and innocent, and yet he was brutally murdered and crushed spiritually to pay a penalty for offences he didn't commit. And yet our hope didn't die, because that man rose again. And he will return and make everything new. It says in Revelation that Jesus says, the old order of things has passed away. Behold, I am making everything new. He is going to return, remake everything, and set things how they were meant to be. That is our hope. So you may be sat there thinking, you might not be someone who's saved, you might not be a follower of Jesus. You may be sat there thinking, God, that's all hogwash. That is nonsense. I want to challenge you. You are more than entitled to your opinion, and that is no issue with that at all. But I want to challenge you, stick around for 9 weeks. Invest some of your time and life and money. Buy this book, read it, reread it, talk to me about it, talk to someone about it, come along to a small group maybe. I would love to have you in our Explore group. If you've got genuine questions, if you sort of like, really, this just doesn't make any sense to me, I'd love to have you there. Not so we can all ambush you because you're the only one and we're a big group. We'll tie you up and keep you there until you change your mind. But because we want to engage and get to know you and show you how Jesus Christ has made a real difference in my life and in all of our lives. So I want to challenge you, give it 9 weeks. Give it 9 weeks, an hour and a half on a Sunday morning. That's 9 hours plus 4.5 hours, 13 and a half. That's some good, that's speedy maths. That's terrible, isn't it? Give 13 and a half, maybe 15 hours when you're looking at it on your own. And then if you're still not convinced, you can just go, okay, I'll shake your hand and say, hoping to never see you again. Because you've given the time to it, you've dedicated the time to it, and you've actually made an informed decision. I wouldn't want to never see you again, because hopefully we'd be friends after 9 weeks. But so to finish, once again, I want to challenge us who are part of Christ First, ex-oneers, as Simon says, to really battle and work through questions, the difficulties that are being raised and addressed on a Sunday morning. We're going to be doing it in our Explore groups. That's right. I'm definitely right in saying that. Didn't have a doubt in my mind, but I did, and then I wrestled with it, and I was okay. So don't just listen to what's being said over the next few weeks and then just go out repeating it parrot fashion, because that doesn't help anyone. Let's get to grips with it, apply it to our own life, and then we can respond to people in a relevant, engaging way. Let's be prepared to speak to anyone who asks. Make time to speak to people. And whenever they ask, it doesn't matter if it's the last thing on Friday and someone's just said to you, I'd really like to ask you a question. Let's make that a priority. So rather than saying, I'm really sorry, it's, I've got to get home this weekend, I'm tired of being at work. Let's make that a priority to give that time. Let's be uncompromising and yet still be gentle.